Well, it's time now for a Scoop, our international media show. With the war in the Middle East, we've dedicated one episode each to media coverage in Iran, the United States, and Lebanon. Today we look at Israel and how censorship is shaping the public's understanding of the war. For decades, Israel's military censor has had an integral role in the country's media culture, infamous for its restrictions on journalists reporting on what it deems sensitive information. And those restrictions are getting tighter and tighter. Here's Al Jazeera.
Iranian missiles are hitting Israel. So why are we seeing so little of it? Leading news agencies, including Reuters, say Israel's military has banned live broadcasts of the skyline during missile alerts. Images of interceptions, widely shown at the very beginning of the war, are now restricted. Journalists are also barred from filming impact sites near sensitive locations. These restrictions are enforced by Israel's military censor. National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has warned media organizations against violations, promising zero tolerance.
And major news networks have acknowledged difficulties. On March 3rd, days after the United States and Israel attacked Iran, CNN's Erin Burnett was broadcasting outdoors in Tel Aviv when she pointed up to the night sky. Take a look.
As we're talking, I will just say, and we're not going to show this live because we don't show this live, but I do see interceptors going up from where I can say that we just saw one go up there. We're not showing you that because we're not going to show, the Israeli government does not allow us or want us to show where that may have come up, that interceptor.
Earlier that same day, a correspondent for CNN Turk and his camera operator were briefly detained during a live broadcast in Tel Aviv following Iranian missile strikes on the city. They were allegedly near a military building. Now, on March 17th, officers obstructed a journalist with Qatari-based Al Arabi TV while he was reporting live on a missile strike, also on a building in Tel Aviv. Canada's public broadcaster, CBC, reported on these restrictions and what journalists face for violating them.
In a country like Israel, for example, rules have been evolving over this war. You have to be very generalized about where missiles are landing. And if you violate those rules, you risk losing your permit to work in the country, being deported, even arrested and detained.
For more, we can cross to Tel Aviv and speak to award-winning journalist Gideon Levy. Hello to you, Gideon. First of all, just want to ask you, in one of your recent pieces, you called the media soldiers of the IDF. What made you say that?
The problem, William, of this media in Israel is not so much the military censorship, and we may talk about it. The main problem of Israeli media is the self-censorship, which is much more dangerous and much more destructive. The media by itself chooses now, for many years, but especially in the war of Gaza, not to show the Israelis what they think the Israelis don't want to see. And we got now 2.5 years of such a poor coverage of the war in Gaza that anyone in any village in France saw more of Gaza than any Israeli in Tel Aviv. This was not made by the military censorship. This was the commercial choice of my colleagues, of the Israeli media, choosing for commercial reasons, not ideological one, not to bother the viewers too much with unpleasant pictures. Now we are facing the war in Iran, and that's a little bit different. Now it's really military censorship. By the way, the only Western democratic country with censorship at all. But I wouldn't exaggerate about it because it's really limited to very few subjects. This is not the enemy of the freedom of speech in Israel. The enemy of the freedom of speech in Israel are the media outlets by themselves.
Yeah, and that's interesting because, first of all, we can't measure self-censorship. There's no way to know how often it happens, how enforced some of these newsrooms are that might make a journalist choose to change the way they write up a piece. The other effect, though, is also some people seem to be proud of that the report was cleared by the censor, perhaps boasting that they didn't have to alter it. And that's really hard to cover a war and be general without any specific details.
That's really, you touch a very pathetic point when journalists are all the time telling their viewers on TV, what I tell you now was approved by the censorship. This is really ignorance of journalists who don't even start to understand what is the role of a journalist, including in times of war. Your role is never to serve the government or the army or anyone else. You should serve the viewers and you should say the truth. And most of them don't understand it at all. They think that they are working now in the service of the state. But we can't speak about censorship without mentioning the fact that Israel prevented of any Western journalists to get into Gaza for 2.5 years now. This is another shameful thing which cannot be ignored. Both Israeli journalists and Western journalists, it's maybe the only war in history which is totally not covered.
Yeah, and nearly 300 journalists were killed amid that war in Gaza between 2023 and 2025, at least in the wider region. Gideon, just wondering how, what does it say, this existence of the Israeli censor? What does it say about the health of the democracy? I mean, in many countries, it's common to see governments try to control the flow of information. But what Israel is doing is taking it a bit of a step further, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I can tell you that in the first years of this state, in the 50s and in the 60s, it was much worse, because many, many more subjects where we were forced to send to the censorship. Now it's really only about military issues, and right now it's mainly about locations of missiles and inspections, but it's really not the main issue. When we speak about freedom of speech in Israel, we should speak about the fact that, for example, not only in the war in Gaza you didn't see Gaza, but in this war you will not hear any critical views about the war in Israeli media, in the mainstream media. A lot of critics about Netanyahu, about the government, about politics, about economy, nothing about the war. And then you get this North Korean figure of 93% of the Jewish Israelis who support this war. Can you believe it? 93%. Give me one example of any issue which gets such a majority in a democracy. No doubts, no question marks. Following this war, justified or not, clever or not, we stand behind it. This is not a very good sign for the health of the society.
Yeah, Gideon, back to what you mentioned, no images or representation of dissent. So on the sort of like nightly debate programs on the news, they don't have anyone that would be anti-war, at least questioning the position of the government?
I'll be personal for a moment. I used to be on Israeli TV regularly, at least twice, 3 times a week, twice a week. I was attending many panels. Ever since the war in Gaza started, I was twice on Israeli TV. Ever since the war in Iran started, I was even not once. It's not my personal problem. I don't have any problem with it, but it shows you that there is no room for doubts now. Again, it's not the government. It is the commercial outlets who don't want to bother the viewers with criticism because they know they don't want to hear criticism. Again, not a very good sign.
Yeah, one of your pieces also called War, the Opiate of the Masses. Could you explain that?
Yeah, it's again this unbelievable support in wars in Israel, while any diplomatic step, any compromise, any negotiations have always problems to get a majority in Israeli public opinion. In Israel, it's so much easier to launch a war rather than to go for negotiations, diplomatic, peaceful negotiations. And again, it gives you the mindset of Israel in those days. And this mindset worries me much more than the Iranian nuclear.
And do you think that Israel and the United States might end up diverging paths here about how to end this war?
No, because Israel will have to obey the United States. Israel has no say now. The only one who will decide is Donald Trump. Israel is not in a position to continue the war in Iran if Donald Trump will say enough is enough. Both, we don't have the capabilities to conduct this war without the Americans' assistance, and not also the political, the economical, and other aspects. So there is no question. Once Donald Trump will decide to put an end to the war, this war will be over. I'm much more worried about what will happen then in Lebanon, because in Lebanon, Israel might continue.
Yeah, and that's a big concern there. And also with the war in Iran, some of these other major stories are being overshadowed by it, whatever is happening in the West Bank and East Jerusalem and Gaza, and also Lebanon, as you point out to. And there's only so many journalists to cover all these stories, and many of these issues aren't getting the media attention they deserve.
Absolutely, but this is not new, unfortunately. What is new is that the Western media lost any interest in Gaza. And this is very sad, because nothing in Gaza was solved. And once the media turns its back to Gaza, Gaza will be forgotten and will stay in its inhuman conditions maybe for years. I understand that when there is another front like Iran, all the attention goes there. But meanwhile, Gaza is totally forgotten. And in Israel, it's not forgotten, because in Israel, deliberately, the Israeli media never cared about Gaza. But the Western media did care about Gaza, and it lost its interest, and this worries me a lot.
And Gideon, have you seen over the course of your career the attitude towards journalists, whether it's from officials, from the military, or just from the public? Have you seen the attitude shift?
Oh, yes. I mean, journalists were never too popular in Israel, and they were always portrayed, at least at certain circles, as an obstacle. Like many Israelis think that democracy is an obstacle. You will hear more and more Israelis who will tell you that in Israel there is too much democracy. We don't want this democracy. We want, especially in times of war, no debates, no arguments, no criticism, no question marks. We want to support our government and our army without any doubts. So the democratic understanding, the Israeli democracy is very thin. And we see now how easily it can be broken, and it is broken, both by the government and by the public opinion, who is not so interested in democracy. I think that democracy in Israel is, people perceive it as a luxury, as something that we can easily live without it. How did some politicians say the other day? Democracy is not mentioned in our Bible, so why would we bother?
Gideon, thank you so much for your time. Gideon Levy, award-winning Israeli journalist. And that brings us to our quote of the week. It comes from Mohammed Al-Hassim. He is TRT's world correspondent based in occupied East Jerusalem. And he wrote in one of his pieces to camera, quote, "In a conflict where every image carries weight, controlling what the world sees has become part of the fight. In this war, what stays in the dark can be as powerful as what lights up the sky." That's it for this edition of Scoop. Please stay tuned to France 24.